Welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about a game from the Chinese City League A. So the Chinese City leagues, they each have a team of maybe around 6 players, each representing a major city in China. And each round, I think it's a round robin, and when two cities play against each other, I think they have 4 matches, and for a win, you might get a point or something, and then you also have you choose which one of those matches to be a top board. So whoever wins that gets an extra point. And I think one of the matches is also chosen to be a fast game. I don't know the details for what this game is though. There are many very strong players playing in the Chinese City leagues, including the very top players from Korea, including Shinden So, and from Japan, Ishibuki Ryoyama Yuta. I think he's playing in the B League. And I think some European players are playing in the C League. But that's a bit intermittent, I think. It's not so regular. Okay. So, Yaoyu is one of the older generation. I think, yeah, he's 38, I think. So he's the same age as Guli. And from the 8P, I think you can see that he hasn't won any international competitions, but he's always been up there, been 8P for a very long time. I remember a few years ago, he lost by half a point to Kujie in a game where he was winning by a lot the whole way through, and he just messed up at the end. And he almost upset Kujie's non-losing streak when Kujie played as white that year. Okay. Sheker is one of the younger generation. Again, you can see he hasn't won a title yet. I'm guessing he's about the same age as Li Jingchen and Xia Hao, who are both world champions, born in '98. He's currently ranked number 17 in the world, according to GoRatings.com. Okay. So Black plays this slightly unusual move, but you can, if you're familiar with KataGo, and I think even Leader Zero, this move has become quite popular lately. Even though AlphaGo kept showing us to play the 04 move. And KataGo recommends invading at the 3-3. And you have this sort of variation. You connect up the side. And in this shape, it's actually a bit more important to just take the territory solidly and grow, because there's not many weaknesses. So it's already quite difficult for white to live inside when black is solid like this. So white just reduces from the outside. And there's shoulder hit, there's the 3-3. For example, you can play something like this. And it looks a bit strange with all these two space extensions. It looks a bit narrow. But this is one idea. In the game, white attached. This is a move that we learned from AlphaGo. So, but in the two AlphaGo games, one went like this. Black descends. And even though black gets a solid corner, white is trying to say that black is a bit over-concentrated, spinning too many moves defending this cutting point. So white will just sort of take the side points around these two star points on the lower side and right side, stay a bit away from this black thickness, and just say that black has nowhere to develop. The other game went like this. This has been played so many times in the Chinese City League. Sorry, it's extend. Connect, rather. And I think it was here. Funnily enough, not making this exchange. Though I think in that game, Black already had made this exchange and then continued. And White did something like this. And then there was this sort of move as well, which was really bizarre, but it was aiming at the through space extension with this peep. There are lots of variations with this. This is so popular as well. Black gets quite solid, and White's not yet alive, but this Ko is quite annoying. There's still some funny agi around to M3. In the game, Yaoyu just pulls back very simply. It may be that he was not so confident in his own research, because this is a very solid move. But the AI thinks it loses it just that little bit. It's the most submissive move of the 4 local standard responses to the attachment. But Yaoyu's style is to play solidly, I think. So this is understandable. The more popular variation these days is to Hane underneath. And there was another game at this time. So this is a game from round 1 of this year. I think Li Weiqing played against Qin Jinso. I may look at that game later, which goes like this. And this Atari, while it looks slow, it's kind of saying that it's a bit hard to invade and reduce this black wall without this Atari. And since Blight is so solid, it's actually quite hard for black to invade on this side of the board. And you can invade around 3-3. And oops. This was the variation I got from KataGo. So in the game, black just pulls back very solidly, and this allows white to descend in center. So you can kind of say black is trying to say that black still gets the corner anyway, and white's stones are weak. But white later has the potential to use 05 to make a moyo on the lower side. For now, white has to back off and defend the stones. And it's not so clear what black is getting, but black will have the 05 turn later. In fact, at this point, black had several other possible moves. KataGo liked turning as well. And just treating the corner lightly. So black is putting a bit more emphasis on trying to make territory around here. So it's KataGo in the game really wanted to add another move around R10 or so. There's also moves such as this, but white will back off a bit further away. But a follow-up in the corner is still very big. The shape point on the lower side, if you want to continue, seems to be here. Simply because of this particular shape. And black is connected in a nice way. But it's just slightly early, but it was one of the things that KataGo was considering. Because it isn't that easy to attack white's shape on the right side like this. And it's not, therefore it's not clear what black is getting in terms of territory. So black just blocked. And this was, KataGo agreed with this move. However, it thought that white made a small mistake here. It really thought that with this structure, with black being solid here and black being solid here, it was very important to have a living group on the right side. Otherwise, there would be no good place to reduce or invade because black was so solid around here. I think once you have a solid group here, you're not so worried about black spending extra moves around 05. They're not going to expand the right side on a big way. So if black plays 05, you don't have to worry about doing something on the right side, which could cost you more with these two stones. And if anything, you could play around 05 yourself later, once you have a solid group on the right side. I'm guessing that these young players are probably thinking more territorially and just thinking that if you add another move on the right side, it's still not your territory. And it's not that big either, because it's already been reduced a bit on the lower side. So for that reason, it really thought that black should connect everything up. In the game, black approached. There was a strange variation that looked like this. So of course, once you have this, then the approach is very big. So each side is trying to make their moyo bigger. And black continues like this. And the shoulder hit becomes the vital point to make N6 look less useful as well. And something like jumping. Something like this. Alternatively, even considered playing a little bit further away from the thickness, but more territorially. And often you'll see the AI have this sort of balance to their moves. So if the opponent plays a bit more territorially, you also play a bit more territorially. And you're interested in invading this area now that it's larger. But maybe since this move is a bit closer to this black area, it's also a bit more difficult for black to make a big moil on the upper side from attacking white. So since white has invaded, black also invades. Because it's hard to it's hard to attack. But it's also hard for white to attack this stone, because if black does get a few extra stones, it might be easier to attack. And what in this case, where white already has a group here, white isn't so interested in running, because black can find moves in between the two running white groups to attack both at the same time. So white just lives, even at the cost of making black solid here. In the game, black continues in this corner, and white kicks. So arguably this is quite territorial, and it was popularized by AlphaGo, AlphaZero in particular, in the games against AlphaGo Lee. But the AI, again, isn't very fond of kicking in this particular position, when black is quite solid in the center already. So maybe it doesn't want black to gain, have another Joseki where black is getting solid in the center. Instead, it wants to reduce black's moya immediately. And it's saying that black has a difficult choice between the upper side and the left side. So in this Joseki, even though black is wiping out white's potential on the left, white is also wiping out black's potential on the upper side. Something like this. Its second option was to invade here. And it's almost the same, except that white is more interested in playing another move on the right side to settle the right side stone this time, because there is a more efficient two-space extension. So both sides are playing for and to counter that. From this move, you can see Yaoyu's style of playing a bit more solidly. The standard move is certainly to play here. The difference, perhaps, you can see from KataGo's variation is that white has this move. It's a fairly standard shape point actually, but it's probably more played when black is already having this pincer stone, so that if black does try to fight, then white can hane and get extra stones to attack black on this side. So black owes a move here. So black gets more solid on the upper side, but white gets that extra move in the center, which could attack this black group. It's also very interested in still playing here. And you have these pretty strange variations with this sort of fight. And you let white come down here, but since you have Sente to jump out here, it's still a fight. Funnily enough, you're meant to extend here rather than honey, because white's going to play here anyway. And it seems crawling at the top is not as big as it looks when black is building a moya on the right side. So like this. And then it plays here, which is a bit confusing, but white is trying to make shape before black has the chance to poke at these weaknesses with the wedge and the knight's move. So white takes the AI move. If anything, the next best move is to approach closer to the upper side, both because this is a bigger moya and the lower right is fairly thick black shape. This time black might actually pincer from this side, just to consolidate this black area into territory. In fact, this black corner isn't 100% solid because there was still a few small agis at S4 and R3, but after this, it's mostly gone. The advantage of black playing more solidly like this is that since white doesn't have the forcing moves from the center, white is forced to be submissive in this corner. And actually there's still problems in the corner. And we'll see that in the game as well, much later though. We have this variation. You can also consider starting here. And this is the modern Joseki, especially after AI, because our understanding is that white has to play here, and you can't play here, even though this was the old Joseki. It looks like white gets a lovely result, but actually white is still not alive. And this is going to help black's moya on the upper side quite a bit. And this is a huge space on the right side as well. So it's pretty difficult for white. So actually the shape is to play just the Kasumi, but it still remains cramped. And there's this nice modern move as well, where you can get away with playing so far. It's not actually completely connected because black has a short stability, so you can clamp on one side and clamp on the other. But it's hard to choose which side to clamp, and black's going to be getting a lot of shape from capturing your stones on either side. Okay, so white's just playing the wedge is the proper move, especially when both sides black is pretty solid. Okay, so in the game, black approaches from this direction. The AI thought this was good, but you can also pincer, especially as you have the backup of playing more solidly here. But it's concerned that white will take the 2 space. And this has a big impact. It's also exposing some weaknesses, because when you play closer, although you're more solid, actually black's not yet alive here, because white is taking the white's point in the corner. So an invasion around the upper side is actually pretty imminent. So this has made white pretty much alive in the corner. And then white has some choices. It gave this as the initial suggestion, but with more playouts, it actually liked the invasion. Even though the shape is horrific, it is just about getting out. And it looks like white has made 2 empty triangles in this game, but they're both having an effect to reduce black's eye space. And this is meant to be black's side of the board, where black is trying to make... black could have been making quite a lot of territory here. So in the game, black played this, expanding on this side. There's still weaknesses in the corner. We'll see that R14 is a very standard move to settle white here. But on the other hand, it also somewhat gives up on agi on the upper side. If we think about this, maybe something like this is the standard move. There's still a lot of agi in the corner. White can still almost live in on the upper side. But if black does get solid in the center, say if you can get this peep, I'm not sure which side white will push, but if we just imagine something like this, then the upper side is becoming very large. So maybe that explains what white did in the game, which was to shoulder hit. This is a very standard move. I mean, normally you might find it hard to choose between the 2 space extension, which will obviously walk into this. But the small knights move isn't particularly efficient either. Your next follow-up is another small knights move, around R7, but it's still not doing that much. Ideally, you want to play R7 maybe when black has already added a stone here to attack you, and then you're still leaving funny agi around R14. Actually, another standard move here is S15 to make the eye of the corner and connecting underneath. So white's saying that this move has already gotten lots of agi to live on the right side. There's no great way to attack anymore. And so white wants to reduce black's more on the upper side. The AI thought this was premature, even though it was one of the things it was considering. And it's actually saying that at this point, you don't want to reinforce black around here just yet. You still have the potential of invading. And for the time being, your moya is also pretty big. So it's almost like black has played a third line move, trying to make a moya and take territory, and so white will do the same. Just taking the large big one on the side, the final large one. It said that this was the way to attack, which is a rather funny shape. It's rather clear that if you just play on the third line, it's not having much impact. You just get pressed low, even if white does something funny in the center. Not sure exactly where. You don't have the ladder, but I don't know. There might be something like this that you can do, though that might not be the right timing. Or you could just start reducing from the outside and take the vital point of the expansion of both models at this point, because white's Moyo is getting pretty big as well. But like this, it says that white will jump out. At which point you've taken away a lot of the Yaoyu in the corner. Or at least you've made black alive enough that it's not going to have such an impact if white does manage to live. And black has the same strategy in invading this corner. But this looks very strange. I've never seen this shape before, and it's hard to imagine what the follow-ups are. It's clearly aiming for this, but I'm not sure what the next move is. I'm tempted to play the empty triangle, because I don't want to crawl on the second line. Maybe I'm not sure if you can cut. But it looks complicated. But anyway, you can clamp. If you are going to play on the upper side, it wanted to play here and actually just follow this variation. Okay, so like this. Black will play here. So white has taken some territory, so black will take away white's potential territory. And then white invades here. So it's clearly trying to just make Miai of using the Agi in the corner to live either in the corner or leave some potential for life. And also have some potential to get out into the center. There's not really enough space here to live directly, so it's playing quite lightly. So this way black is consolidated at least this group, which is pretty important now that white is taking the corner, especially as it's also setting up follow-ups. The standard way to follow up is b15, to poke out this cutting point and then to live in the corner. Okay, so this is the variation. And then its other suggestion is to play the small knights move. Rather curious. At which point, instead of taking a move on the third line, black wants to invade on the second line. So you can see how there's this funny balance where white is more territorial, so black is more territorial in response. And there's this complicated Joseki, which I don't think there's any point going into. Alternatively, this is still a move. We have the same principle as before, where in response to a shoulder hit, if there's another weak group above, which you really want to disconnect, after all this is a full space extension, even though there's this nice back wall here, white has also got a bit of a wall here, so this fight is possible, especially as you might connect up on the second line later. But this looks pretty crazily complicated. So white doesn't want to invest in these stones too much, because they're not having any critical impact on the upper side black group just yet. I think white might even be considering double Hane later, because if you just pull back, then there's still a cutting point, which is a bit painful. Okay, so in the game, white played the shoulder hit. And I think this sort of idea first, well, at least it's really in our consciousness because of Lisa Doll's the AlphaGo's move against Lisa Doll. I think it was game 2. Shoulder hitting fourth line stone, which was pretty shocking at the time. In a way, black is already fairly solid, but in another way, you're trying to still use black's weaknesses to keep your corner safe. So after this, maybe you're setting up another weak group, which is not necessarily the best strategy. But this is all much less. The differences are much less than 1 pointer, so you can't read too much into them. Even though these are, I did use very high playouts, so around 500,000 playouts. So the AI is probably very accurate at that level, even though it's the opening. So again, it didn't want white to jump, it wanted white to defend the corner. Still, the next move was pretty inexplicable. As I said before, you don't really want to be pincering here, on the third line at least. Especially now that white has created another weak group, you might actually want to separate and attack them. This is kind of allowing white to connect. And white doesn't have to save either of them because black stones are all quite low here. So it was a very strange direction of play. So the AI did start liking white here. It said that now that white is creating another weak group here, that's a bit far away from white's shape here in the corner, because black is fairly solid there. It's the correct timing to make use of that. White can follow up, trying to aim at black's weaknesses, because the whole black group doesn't quite have enough eyes. This variation is pretty intense. So it's just making life with one group at a time. And the upper side group, it looks pretty behind enemy lines, but there's potential for life space on the side, and more importantly, there's potential just to sacrifice it if you can get life in the corner. Because actually these moves that white has are creating a cutting point. So if you think of the standard variation as something like, I think you have to descend normally, something like this. You can see that white's stones are pretty close to this cutting point. They're going to do some damage to black's ability to get out. So I think the standard idea here would be to sacrifice. If we see what the AI says, okay, it doesn't go beyond this. But anyway, I assume that you can't really give this up on this scale, but you'll probably push out here. Especially as black has already played a stone at J14. Generally, if black hasn't yet played the stone at J14, you might connect. And it would be an interesting way for black to play J14 in Sente. But now that black has already played J14, you can't really afford to connect when your whole group is completely behind enemy lines already. Especially as black has some Sente moves on the right side. Okay, so next best option is to just disconnect. And in order to convert white's moves into territory, it wants to go down to the third line already. I mean, white's shape doesn't look that great. But on the other hand, black's moves aren't really making territory yet. You can see that they're just going to cut white. Presumably white has to defend here next. And Black hasn't yet really made territory on either side, because there's still some problems in the corner, and this is undercut. Alternatively, there's the shape point here that it offers, and it's a similar principle where white is getting out. Black is creating a wall, both getting out into the center, which will have a big impact on the lower side Moyo, but a lot of it is also about making C12 more powerful, so that it's going to attack white. And white, it might have the potential to attack white's group in the corner at the same time. Oh, so Tanuki at this point, well. Just make shape like this. White just place a bit submissively, respecting black's thickness in the center. Because there are very few weaknesses in black's shape here. But I guess white is interested in taking away black's eye space, at which point the whole black group will have some problems. Alternatively, now that white has tried to invade your area, it's more interesting to invade your opponent's area. But it seems just to be making this exchange before coming back here. Extension, I mean, that was the old move, but it's a lot less common these days. There's a lot of Joseki with attaching at C14 directly. Stuff like this happening. Something like this, I think. I don't remember exactly. No, I think that can't be right. Maybe you capture and then you go like this. Okay, and white comes down, and black coming out is still aiming at the cutting point, even though there's a wall waiting for this black group. But there's not very many other moves for black to make shape here, because this corner is already blocked off. You don't really want to connect on the second line. At least this move is aiming at the beat to attack white a little bit on both sides. If black is out in the center, then there will still be some problems in white's corner as well. Right, its next move is to play here, at which point white plays black's vital point, but black just comes back here anyway. Okay, that's pretty complicated, but black is cutting it in slightly better shape, arguably, than in the game. Finally, there's this move, at which point white will just treat these exchanges as light, take territory now that black is so solid. If black starts to attack, then they're still quite light. Yes, exactly, yeah, you just defend the right side first. They're still going to make it difficult for black to capture them. You don't want to capture them like this. There's still so many ways to use these stones. Like, you could do something around here. Probably even that's too slow. Maybe white will do something more active to reinforce this group and develop the Moyo at the same time. There might be some things in the corner, though I think that might be premature because it will damage your chances to save the 2 stones. Maybe shoulder hit looks reasonable. So it suggests leaning on this group to capture the upside on the largest possible scale. So white needs to make life. Oh, sorry, wrong way. And like this. Actually, this is a very standard move that appears in a lot of KataGo's variations here. So just this 1-2 punch against white's shape. Sometimes it's to play here directly. And for example, some of the variations it just likes living here. Oops, not that one. I think it was extending and then something like this. I think it was often in combination with the move around here, but Yeah, otherwise you might fall into the double honey. And often it was saying white just needs to jump down. And this is always going to be using the fact that white has this extra stone at p5 locally. So it's not completely useless. It must be doing something. And that's just making these two white stones weak, low on liberties, less freedom to get out. So you can see that even in this variation where white ends up connecting to k4, the whole white group will be weak if black manages to live and completely wreck the lower side. So often it's a good idea just to give the two stones up. So black's p5 move is still doing something territorially. It's just that since the white stones are still not dead, it's maybe not that efficient. Okay, back to the game. Black played this pretty surprising move. I mean, when I saw it, I just thought this direction of play was bizarre. And white continued on the upper side, which was fine. But it was saying that white was really getting an advantage here if white just starts living. This is the standard response actually, just when you're pincered on both sides, you start living in the corner. This was one of the variations given. Just to live very comfortably in the corner. And what is R9 doing here? There's not really much of a cutting point in this position. It's not as if without R9, black would need to defend the cut, because black is so solid here. So white is just getting this corner on a very nice scale. And it continued with this variation, just trying to use the fact that white has another weak group here. So it's using this. This is a strange driving to sushi, but it's just because of these two stones. When I first saw this variation, I couldn't believe it. Like, white was just giving up the entire right side. But amazingly, it said that this was quite a bit better for white. And this is also another standard Joseki. Just this shape one actually exposes this wedge, so it's the perfect place to play. And white can't afford to let black get out here. Then white's shape is completely wrecked. Yeah, it's really hard to judge what's going on this side of the board because black had so many more stones here, and especially now R9 looks. No, actually R9 is still useful here because now you're trying to capture white. But actually R9 is still not completely defending the edge of the cutting point, because if white has any extra stone around here, then the cut is going to become a problem, because black is in a shortage of liberties. So that's part of the reason why this is okay for white. I mean, how does this go? You can't, normally you can't really afford to clamp. You have to save these two stones, and then the clamp isn't necessarily right. But you kind of need to short white's liberties as well. If you play like this, it's actually already a bit risky. There's this cut as well. Probably can't play like this at the moment, can you? Even like this, it looks very risky. So actually, this doesn't look like it works for black. Well, unless it's a ladder. There's no way this is a ladder. Okay, actually this cut is a serious problem. That must be why it's okay for white. So yeah, so it looks like there's no choice but to clamp, just to get that momentum, just to save the right side, even though you help white to get out. And then, I don't know what the shape is. If you can get this Atari, you want to get the Atari. It's a bit risky though. If you go Atari and make some sort of shape, this leaves the peep, so you can't play there. But even so, it feels shapy. Yeah, this looks pretty risky. The other option was to just consolidate again. So we'll come back to this variation in the game, and then attach. This is so standard, especially when white is alive on this side. Yeah, so my actually, even though it's not one of the top few suggestions, it is one of the suggestions. My instinct was to attach here, because this just feels so low, and it's not really doing a great job of attacking white. Arguably, however, if black does get solid here, it's still going to have a negative impact on white's shape on the lower side. It's still p5 is still doing a job to disconnect white's moves around here. For example, later you don't necessarily want to give up this, actually, just in terms of territory. Later you might want to play around here and aim at, say, p8 or q8. So it's not, if your shape still isn't solid after this attachment, then it's not necessarily a good idea. For example, you still haven't connected up to these other stones. You're still not alive. But actually, I think it will say that this is good for white if it's just like this. But it was worried that black would push and cut. Then empty triangle here. Even though the cut looks great, it's actually useless because p5 is already here. White would just crawl on the second line. So actually the only useful move you have is some move in the center. So if you have lots of stones in center, then you can play f7. But the main move you're going to be using is p8 in center, because then you're going to Atari, and then it's going to be various clamp B, actually. Or even just capturing a stone is more efficient than cutting. Right, so turn, connect, and wedge, using white's extra stones around here. So it says you have to Atari this side. If you Atari this side, presumably you get into trouble here. I think black can get out, maybe? Actually, maybe not. No, I think black can get out, but the problem is also that there's so much agi on the right side. It doesn't look easy to kill, even if even if you do something like this, just like this, for example, as simple as this, it still looks like you owe another move to kill this white group, and you've given up a huge amount in the center, and the M9 has become useless. Anyway, that's a complicated fight. So in the game, white just continued, maybe thinking to take more territory away from black, and may have some idea that white could attack black here, but it just didn't work out that way at all. This was definitely black's area of influence. White had another weak group here, and even though this was a pretty good move, it didn't end up very well. So black beat and came out. KataGo just said, just come out here. And then white would start this fight. And that one extra white stone is making a big difference to how much eye space white has, and of course how much strength white has. Now, I found this pretty interesting as well. The white's way to make shape and defend this big knight's move is to play so tightly against black's shape. If black responds, then you can see that it's already defended actually. And maybe there's still, I mean, say if you add another move, there's this sort of shape. Maybe white would do something in the center first. Not sure where though. I mean, actually, maybe just here is still proper shape. Or honey, or turn. Not sure. Actually, I don't think you need to defend the shape. You still actually have this sort of move in the center, so actually maybe you don't need to defend the shape, and you can start running away. But it said that black needs to play around here. And then white has this cutting point to exploit, which wouldn't have been there if you didn't play so tightly. And now that you've played so tightly, actually black can't get into any of these spaces, so they're all potential eye space. So that was a very efficient way to make life here. Anyway, but peeping is fine as well, as long as you play this vital point. You can't let white connect up here, otherwise then there's just this massive moire. I mean, you can't afford to let this sort of thing happen. This is all now white potential, which is unacceptable. And you just don't have the same sort of attack that you would against the corner. And R9 has become a territorial move rather than an attacking move, because there's not much hope to attack white when white is solid in with this group as well. Okay, so you have to get out. And this was the only move it suggested pretty much as well. Other ideas were to come out around here. But actually white's shape is still flimsy. There's a cutting point. And over here there's various things that black can do. And white's shape is still weak. Black played what looks like a shocking sequence to cut here. KataGo played something as a pretty similar shape against AlphaGo in the Wujin series in the third game out of 3. It's almost trying to say that white's move here is an overplay when white has so many weak groups. But you can see that when you've cut here, black's shape is also pretty cramped and low on liberties at the same time. So it doesn't look reasonable. The AI said you can aim at the cut. You should be aiming at the cut, but you should aim at it from this side. And even here, white has no need to defend. Pretty much, say if you do something random, even if you cut now, this has now become a shape point. And maybe that's one reason black didn't want to play there, because black really wanted white to Atari here, maybe? So the move is to play here. Take your eye on the side. It's pretty much an eye. For example, if you peep and jump, there's still this peep. I guess that's not actually an eye, but there's quite a lot of potential for eye space, and black's shape has become a lot weaker on both sides. And then maybe there's this move instead. That sort of badgy at least. Okay. And still you don't cut. And white is now more interested in defending the cut because white is completely behind enemy lines, but white still can peep before. And defend the cut like this, wow, this is a really confusing shape. I mean, if you push and cut now, then this time white has the ladder. So you have to save these cutting stones, and then white can defend both cuts at the same time. That's no good. There's this shape point, and then, I don't know, maybe white will play like this. This is very funny knight's moves. Its suggested move is to jump. Actually, from one of the other variations I saw, white can pretty much make eyes like this, because now the peep is defending against. Of course, you don't want to do that just yet, because black has a shortage of abilities at this cut, so there's a peep. And we'll also see this in the game. So white's way to defend the cut is to defend in the most active way possible. So it's because you can defend the cut so actively that you reinforce black on this side. Otherwise, because you've lost the opportunity to reinforce the cut by leaning on these black stones. So because white thinks this is a great way to defend the cut, white has peeped this side. Because it kind of helps connect up to these white stones. Black can just capture them, but white takes the time to live in the corner now. So these stones on the right side are pretty much dead, but white will probably live in the corner. Unless black can play here, which might be a thing, but white can just continue as well. Maybe white won't live in the corner quite as efficiently as before because black is so solid here, so maybe white can't afford to get this. But it's still going to be quite a nice life. Yeah, other moves considered are this, at which point white can go back to live on this side. Live with one group at a time pretty much. Even in center because you're still aiming at the corner. Because it's still very difficult to kill this group. And then you defend the cut while getting out. And also making a nice potential life. Jump, jump, jump. Yeah, so we can see black spends an extra stone at h3 just to make sure that white can't attach underneath. If you do attach underneath now, this is pretty terrible shape. Even this might not be center, you might just lose, all these stones look like they're going to die. Even if black just responds, it's not necessarily good for you either. And of course, playing here is still another option. But this time, with that extra black stone, it wants to play more aggressively. It wants to cut immediately. but the fight is still pretty unclear because black is completely surrounded. White is also surrounded, so black can lean on that to make high space. And then white comes back. Now white has got this big wall, black doesn't dare to fight anymore. So black just takes this territory. And this corner still looks a bit funny. There might still be some bad agi in there. Of course, black doesn't look like black has enough space to live if white can enter around here either. But there must be this sort of mutual... It's not mutual damage, mutual defense, maybe? Because if white tries to kill black, then white will probably die, but if in the corner or something. But if black tries to attack the corner, probably black will have problems in his own shape. Okay, so in the game we have the push and cut. I mean, if you hadn't seen this move, would you think of this? Probably, given that it comes up in all the other variations, it will probably be in... you can understand why it's in the forefront of the players' minds. But surely this white group is now very heavy and committed to living in here. Because you can see all of black's moves are working to seal white in. But black has so many cutting points. Surely you can't afford to nuke it now. You can see that whatever happens, black is going to get a wall on this side. All black needs to do is just 1 or 2 more moves, and the white group is dead. Maybe white thought that there was still some ice space on the side, but it didn't work out at all. Maybe let's just look at what happened in the game. White added another cutting stone, just in order to live in the corner in sort of center. But all the cutting stones on the outside were dead. And white took Gote to get out and make some sort of moe on the lower side. But actually the upper right corner is still not alive. It's a 1000-year ko, so certainly it has no points. And black has captured so many stones. And white still has some weaknesses. And black has Sente as well. And we said that black's group here, it wasn't so solid before. Now that it's solid, although it's lived with sort of 2 points here, it is properly alive now. And this corner is behind black's lines. So there's going to be serious problems in the corner. So this was pretty bad for white. You can't afford to nuke here. Essentially, that's the lesson. You have to fight, and what this fight involves is not necessarily saving the white group. Maybe the white player thought that it looked like it wasn't easy to fight her because black can push, and then white is still behind enemy lines. But you can start to imagine what these white stones are doing. These white stones are cutting this black group off. So there's nearly connected to D14 if you can attack black a little bit. And black is short on liberties here. So you might be able to get some extra forcing moves around here in order to attack. Certainly each time you add another move to save your cutting stones, you're going to be getting stones around here. And that's going to make a nice area around here. And you're still aiming at this sort of push and cut as well. Not necessarily push and cut, but there's still some shortage of liberties. That will make it difficult for black to attack your own shape. Okay, the variation given is here, and then you aim at this cutting point from the center with your weak group. So it makes me of doing something with your weak group or cutting them straight through. rather than just trying to live on such a submissive and small scale, to the point where you're not even alive. That happened in the game. Jump. Okay, Kasumi, you're not actually connected properly here, but if black does try to cut, then that collapses both in the center and on the side. Black cuts to make shape. So often, when you're cutting through, it might look really aggressive, but I think part of what Yaoyu is thinking here is to defend his own shape. Because if you had just played those floaty moves that the AI was suggesting you use to attack, then actually there's some thinness here, and it's quite complicated. This is so direct that you can see where your threat is, and White is going to have to play some defensive moves to help you reinforce your own shape. Because White is in a shortage of abilities, White needs to spend some moves to get out, and that might give you time to reinforce your own shape. Sorry, that wasn't right, was it? Okay, here. And attach, wow. Even though black is so short on abilities here, there's a bit of a Tsuji here. You can't, I don't think you can connect. Except, yeah, you don't have, this white stone is a ladder breaker for now. But the standard move would be to Atari here. And for the time being, it's difficult for white because there's so many different groups that white has to handle here. So it's pretty difficult to fight like this. If Hane, then presumably it's counter Hane. For example, if we just look at this, I'm guessing this is the shape. I mean, there's nothing much white can do unless white can cut here, but for the time being, this stone is working well. I mean, even this net doesn't seem to work. I think black still just about has enough liberties, I think, to pull this out. So white just can't get any shape like this for the time being. Anyway, okay, that's not a move. I don't think that's a bad move. So white plays here. So white is defending against this pushing card for now. White does play here. Oh, here is the shape. Wow. Now black has a lot of cutting points, but black isn't willing to give white the eye space. I suppose if you play here, then this is going to give white some eye space, maybe. Wow. Both sides have pretty terrible shape because they're just trying to get Sente and leave the biggest threat because they know that their opponent has to play somewhere else. It really looks pretty difficult for white on this side of the board as well. But I guess white has already gotten pretty big profit living on the upper side, and now that this black group is surrounded, that's also a problem. So white doesn't need much on the right side, but it looks pretty risky as well. So that was by far its preferred move. It also suggested this, but it's a similar idea. You're still going to pull this stone out. Even though black has already gotten this stone, you still had it. Then strike. Right. Well, it looks like white is completely behind enemy lines here. You can wedge and wedge, but you still don't. Oh, you can Atari. That's a code. That's just a code. Yeah, I was thinking that this ladder doesn't work. But wait, what am I saying? You can Atari here. I'm just being silly. Okay, then I'm not sure what black is doing. Maybe black is just giving up the cutting stones? Surely not. No, maybe, because white has already connected solidly. Anyway, in the game, white just set up another weak group. It just didn't seem to have any relation to this super important fight. It would start to have a relation if you started to cut, and then you want to say that black is going to die on one side or the other. But it just doesn't look like black is going to die on one side or the other. You have to actually fight and pull your stones out before you have any threat on black. It's not as if this is not going to kill black, even with these Ataris. So you have to defend your shape first. Okay. And another point is that R9 in a lot of those variations was actually not very well placed. Not doing much. But here, if white is trying to capture black stones on one side or the other, or do something pretty severe, then R9 is going to help massively, just because it's defending black shape. Okay, so it's actually suggested here because it's trying to kill the upper side. This is also fine though. Push and cut looks very strange. It looks like it's just trying to sacrifice everything. The AI, I mean, it was already not so good. But the AI was like, oh my god, there's so many squeezes and driving decisions. Wow. Double honey? Yes, double honey. And connect. And then squeeze, but that's still not captured. This is really crazy. I guess white still has ice space at the top, especially as black's not alive. So it doesn't look like white is going to die here. But this white group is not safe. So does white even have enough time to live? I have no idea what's going on here. This is way too complicated. Obviously all black stones are not alive there. And also black wasn't getting much territory. Maybe other than the upper right. Okay, I also suggested this move. Anyway, white push and cut. So the purpose of this was to just cut black into various groups. You still can't run out here, I think. It still looks like it's a collapse. This doesn't work. black just wins this. And it also allows black to connect up to these stones, so it's not doing anything. So white taros. And black connects, which is correct. Sorry here. Anyway, it said this was severely bad. The worst things came later. The difference is, at the moment, over 2 points. So that's not so big, but it gets worse. So anyway, okay, sorry. So its suggestion was to do something about the weak group, and trying to connect up. The idea is that similar to what I was saying. I said it didn't really work, but still you have to try. You have to try to make black lose out on one fight or the other. You can't afford to lose both fights. So you use this forcing move. You're threatening to connect up underneath. Like, I think if black hunted here, you're just going to connect up underneath. At least you've gained a lot here. You can live in the corners still. You can push in the corner. And it's still very difficult to save these. And I mean, very difficult to kill white still. Like, if you play here, then... maybe something around here? And you're already alive on the right side. One benefit of white playing like this is that when black blocks, then this is center. Actually, for the time being, black can capture. But say black couldn't do that, then there's still this... Oops. There's still a way to capture black in the corner. Like this, it's but anyway, you at least have something in the corner. If it's just like this, then black is dead. So that's one advantage of having this cutting stone. But obviously, these extra black stones are limiting white's eye space here. So you can't really afford to save these stones anymore. But still, the most you can do is to start this sort of fight. And you can at least connect up your cutting stones. You're not alive in the corner, but neither is black on either side. No, actually, this group is pretty much alive, but maybe once you try to live in the corner, if black is trying to kill white, then it's a bit more difficult. So this time you really are threatening to do something around her. If you just jump, say, this... Okay, there's this Kasumi. I mean, this knight's move. So I think black... For example, this doesn't seem to work. I think you can even jump here. Sorry, you can't jump, You have to play this diagonal, this empty triangle. And then there's no net. There's just no net. You actually have to play very accurately. I think this might be the best. I think if you get squeezed, it's okay because black is low on liberties up on the other side. Okay, but anyway, black is dead here. So you've already done something. So that's why black connects. And white continues. That's still going to be forcing, I think. But black can afford to play here. Yeah, I guess so. If you play here now that you have an extra black stone here, you do connect up. Okay. But then white just captures these stones. So you've lived while capturing the stones, and these white stones are still not dead. Honey. I'm not sure what that's doing. Oh, it's just sacrificing this on the while trying to get endgame. So now when you clamp, you're also threatening to connect up to these stones. So you're making it a complete center. And also, it might not just be the clamp, there's also various peeps and button cuts. But back to nukies anyway. And the clamp. There's actually some funny agi of jumping here, but you just black is so solitaire that it's not going to be able to live. Okay, so black, these stones are just completely dead. So this was the best variation that it had at this point. So it's still better for black, but you can see that white has definitely at least succeeded in doing something, winning at least the fight on the right side, even though you've lost points here, as well as giving up these stones. If it was just giving up these stones, it would be okay, but this extra cunning stone is pretty painful. You just played it inside black's area and making black more solid. Basically, at any rate, you cannot Atari here, because that just instantly puts yourself behind enemy lines when black plays here, and you still have to defend this cutting point. If you've got to play anything, you have to play much faster, like this Kasumi jumping around here. So it also suggested Atari. This, and then jump, I think. Yeah, jump. This is the shape to play in the corner. And then this is a very efficient way to cut straight through. Black can kill this corner, but you can still get out. So this has become a proper fight. And there's no cutting point here because black has a short jump abilities. That's an efficient way to get out because black has various peeps in center. But even though white's kind of really behind enemy lines here because p5 is working, as long as white can live, there's still maybe some white space on the side. Actually, maybe not because black playing here is center against this shape. But you can see that you've sealed off the left side, so black has to spend a move trying to make sure black is alive there. So you gain something from that. And you're still gaining something in the center. And you're living with your main groups. The upper right corner was already black's territory, so it's okay to give it up. It was quite a narrow area in which to live in, if that was all you're going for. Normally you don't want to live in that sort of corner, unless you're alive on the outside. You've got some strong group, reducing black on the outside. Okay, yeah, so this is a pretty big mistake. At this level, at least. Sorry. This is all natural. But then this sequence was a complete disaster. Because white saved this cutting stone, but it instantly died. And that was at the cost of losing Sante, say, in the corner, where you could have lived, for example, by connecting this stone. And in the game, the corner wasn't alive anymore. Right, the AI said push. and then just go to live in the corner. At least you can live this time. Black can defend this cut instead. But yeah, this time white is completely alive in the corner. And black didn't play here because then white would still, that would be the same shape as in the game, but black would have taken Gote. So black just plays here to get more liberties. Compared to the game, black still gets center, and white doesn't have the wall in the center. But white can still have some hope of using this cutting stone. White is completely alive in the corner. And white, in game, white has 0 eyes, I think, with this group. In this shape, white certainly has more than that. And actually, white has already mostly saved R11. Okay, but in this shape, black can try to make points with this wall. That's one negative. And also, black can still kind of try to attack and undermine white here. But it's kind of like first things first. You have to make the groups that are in that are fighting. You have to make them alive. Okay, so the honey. So at this point, it was saying there's completely no point in saving this cutting stone. Or just live here. You die here, but wait, you added these stones, really? Okay, I guess this is just all dead though. Still going for Agi. Okay. So white's play here is a little bit inconsistent. Maybe white was planning to play this tombstone. Something like this. Whoops. The problem with this is that black is already connected and your corner's dead. And there's still a cutting point on the outside. And it's not, if only white hadn't Atari'd in this direction. Because like this, white would at least be able to Atari if we exchange these moves. And like this, white could Atari from this direction to capture the cutting stones. So you can see how much damage that Atari did. Okay, so you sacrificed another stone, which meant your corner wasn't even alive. Okay, so the difference here is 5 points. Black's ahead by 5 points. Yes, and it said this was, by this stage, if you want to save the cutting stones, you can't afford to go back to the corner again. You have to play here. And actually, there's still a shortage of abilities. And actually, this is Sante. Yeah, it's Sante. So if you Tanuki, then this is already actually a Ko. It's Ko, I think, because white is also in a shortage of abilities. But if black just played here, well, actually that doesn't work. If black plays here, then white can play here, and you can't short the liberties on either side. The funny thing is that actually white is not threatening to capture black here, because again, white is in a shortage of the liberties on both sides. It's not as if white can capture these stones. So theoretically, black could start a cover here. If you back off, then it's a one-step cover. But anyway, of course that's Sente. So black has to respond. And this time you can push up. And still pull this stone out because you've gained some shape here, some eye space. For example, with Q10 or S9, you're going to get some eyes. The thing is, you're not connected. Yes, sorry, not here. But I guess the idea is that if white does get lots of stones around here, then you're going to attack the cutting stones anyway. So you're going to either connect or attack the cutting stones. This gains in the fight, but loses some territory. Quite a lot of territory, actually. And this, actually, there's still some eye space here, but you're aiming at, you're trying to get white to just add another move, defending that cutting point. This adds another move, and it also tries to make some eye space at the same time. Maybe connect up around here. It has some follow-ups around 08, maybe? So that was not Sente. I guess it has the 08 follow-up after white has a stone around N6. Okay, but white is pretty much still connected if black is going to save these cutting stones. It's difficult to fight this cover. And white still tries to save everything well. Yeah, okay. That's the end of the variation. I think this is not saving the cutting stones, is it? Actually, it is. No, it's not. It's not saving this cutting stone. Anyway, I don't know what you play here then. Okay. Anyway, that's, even this is supposedly better than the game. Yeah, so at this point the difference is 8 points already. There's no way you're going to save these cutting stones anymore. So you have to, the only thing you're left with, like R11 has died, your corner's still not alive, P16 was a sacrifice, S13 was a sacrifice, these cutting stones are not live either. And black just plays so solidly and just takes the cutting stones. This ends up being some sort of semi-eye capture and race. But it said that the difference here was 10 points. Okay, so this black group is cut off. But black can still live. And white can also live? Maybe? Oh, white can live because black is not alive here. That makes sense. But white's not alive yet. Okay, black is alive. And white's not alive yet because this is not an eye yet, just yet. Okay, this is maybe trying to make white... Actually, white is pretty much alive. White is pretty much alive. If you play here, then white can still say extend inside to make that eye. Actually, that doesn't work. Well, anyway, that's an eye. That's 2 eyes. And if black plays around here, then this is This is pretty much 9 centi. You take away this eye, then it looks very, very difficult to kill this. Oops. Actually, you can even extend her, I think. Though this doesn't work because it's a ladder. But if you pull out the side, then, for example, you're falling apart around her. So you have to play here, and then this is center, and then okay, you can see that N6 is helping white get out here. And then even if N6 wasn't there, it looks like it's pretty much alive already. Okay, so black plays here. White extends, threatening a ladder. Black plays here, which doesn't actually connect the cunning stones, but it's okay for now. And we get that variation I showed earlier.